When I talk to students and say they're not doing well academically, so they're coming in to talk to me about that. And once we get in here, I say, well, what else is going on? Is there something else? There's a sense that they can't pin it on anything, right? It isn't because they just broke up with a boyfriend, or it isn't because they're in a class that was tough for them. And there's nothing else that's wrong.
I had transferred to the music school, and I found myself being really disillusioned. There were days when I wouldn't get out of bed, and I just didn't want to classes, or I didn't eat, and I just didn't feel myself at all.
I started to kind of slide back into the groove I'd been before.
He is so sensitive when he's depressed, and little things he can get extremely angry, or he can get angry at himself. He walks out of the room, and I feel like I'm walking on eggshells a lot of the time.
I guess almost immediately when I step in here, it kind of like went downhill for my first year. And what's the word? Too cooped up with yourself, or like something like that. It's like to actually know that that something was actually wrong.
I think the passivity and the hopelessness were primary indicators, but there were certainly other strong things. I think I was very angry sort of at fate.
We had a student once who had just broken up with a significant other and was feeling like his world was coming down, wasn't able to get a grasp on reality or life at that point. And he took pills to either try to commit suicide or a cry for help or reach out for help. The resident advisor was informed, talked with the student, and then that week we spent a lot of time talking one-on-one, just to kind of reach out and let him know that there is somebody outside of a peer who is in the building, who cares. We will try everything in our power to help them.
I wasn't an athlete or a bookworm, so I easily fell into the category of using drugs. And from there, I got kicked out, and my friend was like, well, I have some acid, you want a trip? It's not the best thing to do, but I was like, all right. And I just got really depressed. Well, the symptoms of depression had been building up, and I had no idea what the symptoms were. Or I didn't know they were symptoms of depression. I thought they were side effects from all the acid I had taken.
I think when you're thinking about depression too, especially among college students, one of the things to think about is, has there been a recent increase in substance use? Sometimes when people begin to feel depressed, they may turn to substances to help themselves feel better. Sometimes people just feel very irritable and feel that taking a substance will kind of just take the edge off for them so that they can get through the day and get along with people.
It was one of those semesters where I just worked really, really hard, and then afterwards there was nothing. I had nothing to feel happy about, and then I just started, I started shoplifting, and it was awful.
There were a series of incidents that I pinned it on immediately, having to do with the battle over my tenure. I would wake up early in the morning, 4 a.m. or something, and just pace around.
The fall of my junior year, I really started to just feel a lot of just general anxiety, and I started having some panic attacks, I guess, where I just would feel like I couldn't really breathe.
I think a lot of people just simply aren't aware of what the symptoms of depression are, and they aren't aware of how prevalent it is. There's a huge percentage of people that suffer from depression needlessly that don't really understand or realize that they're depressed.
Right after all the awful things happened, I felt like I've entered a new stage in my life, like a despicable human being.
If I felt any stigmas from myself, in terms of, I've seen it as a loss of strength. I felt very angry at myself at times that I wasn't able to deal with this.
I had this feeling like, why am I feeling like this? I must be doing something wrong. I must not be, totally in tune with my faith or my religion if I'm feeling like this.
Teachers definitely wanted reasons for what was happening, like my not showing up to class and doing poorly in classwork. But I always thought of something else to say because I didn't want to let in. I didn't think it was their, it was any of their business to know.
There are ways for students to withdraw from the class and not hurt their academic standing or be removed from the university.
There is such a stigma attached to depression, and I was afraid that it would affect how they viewed me as a teacher and a scholar. And there's also a sense of what we call sort of, race pride, and the idea that you don't give the white community any reason to judge you adversely.
The concept of depression is kind of different back home. Yeah, it's not even discussed.
For Asian cultures, depression or mental health in general, mental disorder in general, has a significant stigma attached to it. To be considered to have depression or mental disorder is worse than sometimes having terminal cancer.
It wasn't that I didn't know it, it was that I wasn't willing to admit it or willing to say it out loud. And if I wasn't willing to say that as someone involved in medicine and psychology, how can anybody be?
So then all of a sudden, all those times I've ever taken pills, why didn't it come up? And why didn't I take, a few more? I've had several crises during graduate school, and I've been to the emergency room several times.
I guess when you start, being really depressed and I start thinking of suicide and stuff like that, I guess trying to get, control over the situation, I guess that was a crisis. In a sense, I think I mentioned before to my close friends, it was kind of like an identity crisis.
Because it was getting so bad, I wouldn't be able to sleep at night, and I would be watching television. I was having homicidal and suicidal thoughts, and I was afraid. It wasn't like me planning out how I was going to go about killing somebody. There was more images in my head, an image of, if I walked past the kitchen, I would see the pizza cutter in my mind. And I would see the pizza cutter slashing skin in my mind. And then I would think of my roommate in my mind,
It finally came to a head over the summer, toward early June. I had broken up with the boyfriend again, for good, and I was just beside myself. I walked into my guidance counselor's office and announced to him that I was leaving and there was really nothing he could do to stop me. So I went back to my parents and spent about 2 months sitting around, not doing a lot.
She wasn't herself. She was crying, she didn't feel like she had control over things, and it didn't get better.
My mom did come home for lunch, and I said, I just can't take this anymore. And I couldn't even call a psychiatrist. She had to call one for me, because I still couldn't pick up the phone and say, I have a problem.
I emailed my advisor and I told her, she knew about the depression at that point. And I told her that I'm, drinking Mountain Dews and smoking cigarettes. And so she emailed me back and said, well, at least that's all you're doing. And so at that point, I emailed her back and I said, well, actually, that's not all I'm doing. Soon afterwards, I did go to treatment.
She sent me to go see my family physician, and he had me fill out the little 10-question survey about how much you've been sleeping and has your appetite changed and whatnot. And so they put me on medication, and I continued to see my psychologist in Mount Pleasant.
I called the University Health Service, the line, I think it's an emergency line, and they said, well, what you describe are classic symptoms of depression. And I was really relieved because that meant that, this wasn't just my own sort of idiosyncratic problem, but it was actually a clinical condition that could be dealt with somehow.
On my way to class, I stopped by the health services, and they were just like, "Oh, you're really depressed." So they put me in a police car, and took me to the hospital, and enrolled me in an outpatient program for depression, a 2-week program. They just educate you really about depression and get you through that critical 2 weeks where they start you off on the road to recovery pretty much.
I was so much hung up on doing it on my own, and I felt like medication was just something that was, it was going to take over my role. I wouldn't be doing anything active.
They have a great fear that medication is somehow going to change their personality, or somehow if they take medication, they feel it won't be me. And in truth, medication doesn't alter anyone's personality, but it certainly can make them function in a way where they're much more effective and happier and not struggling every day to try to get through each day.
I went to the doctor and she recommended that I take an antidepressant. Took that for a while, but decided that I just didn't think it was doing all that much for me. As far as she was concerned, what could be done had been done, and I sort of felt like I really hadn't gotten anywhere and just stopped taking it entirely.
There's a variety of ways to treat depression. The most effective tends to be a combination of both counseling and medication.
To me, I couldn't explain to them why I was upset, because if I had to do that, I would explain, well, Mom and Dad, I've been caught shoplifting, I have a criminal record, and I've been sleeping around with people, and I'm not doing really well in school. I couldn't say that to them, so they would just be like, why are you so upset? And I couldn't give them I couldn't tell them why.
One of the difficulty, I think, for us is recognizing that different students from different culture may present with different presentations and different symptoms. And therefore, they do not receive the treatment that they should, even if we identify that they are depressed. And trying to get them into treatment is a challenge because of the stigma attached to it.
There are things that are really important to me, my religion being one of them. And that's a reason that I need to get out of this. I think I might have felt that if I had conveyed that something wasn't right to my parents, they would have thought that too, which was the opposite. They would never have thought that. And my mom didn't think that when I did tell her,
I think that other kind of more spiritual methods are not seen as legitimate, which didn't stop me, of course, but it stops me from telling people about them.
I'm really pretty psyched about the future. I don't see depression being a problem for me that I can't handle. And I think that as long as I keep working with my psychiatrist, this is something I can certainly live with and do everything I plan to do anyway.
I still have bad thoughts, but I think about it differently. Now, these days, I'm just depressed, and that's fine. I can live with being depressed. I can't stand being depressed about being depressed.
Sometimes I think my depression and other problems are just an insurmountable barrier to just doing things that I might want. I guess I'm somewhat optimistic, but there's always a reserve of pessimism that I'm going to cling on to. It's a good friend.
And I guess for me, it happens so often, this kind of cycle happens so often, I'm kind of used to it in that sense, so.
Right now I'm at a point, if I was in a position again where it started to come up, I could easily, very quickly identify what was wrong, fix it, and make sure that it didn't progress.
I think what would really help is if, in the same way that we're saying faculty are people, faculty treated students the same way. They're not a homework problem that needs to be solved, right? It's just after the homework problem has been dealt with in office hours, just how's it going? A sense, I think it would help a lot if faculty were informed as to what steps they can take.
Listen to yourself and what you're really feeling, and talk to the people who know you well.
if you do take medication, don't like stop in the middle because it's really bad.
I think you just have to take a practical approach and say whatever works. And that means don't stop until it works.
Although it seems that you can't climb out of it, that eventually you kind of have to climb out of it.
I would encourage friends and family members that maybe notice something different going on with someone that they care about to not be afraid to find out what's wrong.
Don't be afraid or feel like you're betraying anything you've taught yourself or you learned from others by seeking professional help.
I think when I began to feel better was when I wanted to just crow from the rooftops, you know, listen, I mean, you don't have to feel this way.
I just stress the importance of knowledge of the symptoms. Because if you don't know what the symptoms are, you don't know you're depressed. And when I found out that all these symptoms that I had were for depression, it was like this huge, it was like the whole world was lifted off my shoulders. It's just like, wait, this can be fixed, you know? And then from there, I don't want to say it's easy from there, but that's a huge step, is that first step.
If you're one of the, 72% of depressed people who are not letting yourself be helped, stop it. Go get help. I do.